This is a CBSN Pittsburgh special presentation.
Welcome to another edition of Around the Table, Politics 2020. I'm Stacy Smith. For the second time, Democrats have impeached Donald Trump, and for the second time, he is on trial in the United States Senate. This is the first time, though, that the president is no longer in office and he's on trial. And add to that drama, just about everyone agrees what this verdict is going to be, because it takes 67 votes to convict the president, and there are not enough Republicans, it's speculated, to go along with that guilty verdict. So what happens next on the political side? Who wins? Who loses? And who loses support from the American people? Who gains some support from the American people? It's just one of the topics we're going to discuss today on Around the Table Politics 2020. 2021, let's make it. To discuss this and more is our great panelists of analysts. Joining us now, as I'm going to bring them into view for all of you, is former Republican Pennsylvania Governor Tom Corbett. Tom also served as State Attorney General and the U.S. Attorney for the Western District of Pennsylvania. Governor Corbett teaches law now at Duquesne University. On the other side of the table, we normally have the former State Democratic Party Chairman Jim Byrne, but he had a last-minute conflict, so he cannot be with us today, which means that we're going to go back to the Republican side and introduce Keith Schmidt. Keith's political background is strong, dating back to the Reagan campaign of 1980. Keith was the state director for former Republican Senator Rick Santorum, and Keith was also an advisor to the Santorum presidential campaign in 2012. Keith has had his own consulting firm here in Pittsburgh for more than a decade now. We turn now to the great philosopher of Around the Table, Joe Mistick. Joe is a familiar name in state Democratic politics. He's had several roles in the city government, including that of deputy mayor. Joe teaches law now at Duquesne University, and you can read his weekly column on politics and life in the Trib. All right, gentlemen, I've already teed it up. Thanks, by the way, for joining us once again. Second impeachment trial of Donald Trump is underway. Second time the outcome is not really in question. So, Governor Corbett, I'm going to begin with you. If indeed it's the outcome that the president is going to be acquitted, who wins and who loses in this case?
I think everybody's losing in this in some respects, but from a political standpoint, I look at it this way. There are still a huge support group for Republicans who support Mr. Trump. And I think the Republican Party is going to have a very rocky period of time over the next year or two. The Democrats obviously believe that this is appropriate to do, even though he's no longer the president. But I think they're going to use this to make a lot of political hay in contests coming up in 2022 and 2024 against any of the Republicans that vote to acquit. This clearly demonstrates that this is not just an action of impeachment, but it's a political action. Impeachment tends to be a political action also. It's not a criminal conviction or anything like that, but it's been an interesting period of time. And I think it's going to be interesting for at least the next 2 years. Would you agree with that, Joe Mistick?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a pretty wild and crazy couple of years. I don't think anything changes. We are so deeply entrenched right now. And as we saw in the last election, what it was like. It was not a close election, but it was close enough. And it shows that wide divide across America. So I don't think much changes, but I do think it's important that we make a public record, that what went on becomes a part of the public record, becomes a part of our history. I think that's actually essential. Now, will Democrats be able to use it in future campaigns in the short run? Absolutely. The videos are outrageous. Any American is horrified watching that. But then I think we retreat to our camps, and sort of dig back in. But they'll use it. You'll see it in a lot of campaign ads against a lot of the senators who chose to not cast a ballot based upon the evidence, but instead upon some constitutional belief that they have, whether it's founded or not. But yeah, it's going to be a crazy time.
Keith, your thoughts. You work for a United States senator. Let's say that he was up for re-election coming up. Would you be prepared for using this kind of video against your candidate?
I personally don't think that. I think you can sufficiently distance a candidate away from that action. There can't be part of my problem is the broad brush in which a lot of partisan Democrats want to paint an entire party for a violent protest. Certainly, we didn't do the same to them when the cities were burning. for most of the last year. We never accused them of being part of that type of riotous behavior. So I think there's a way to distance yourself or sufficiently be independent of that horrific day on January 6th. But every great democracy, there is a time for politics. And as the former governor said, when you have an impeachment that is largely already predetermined the outcome, which we know will be acquittal, then the process clearly is more of a political process. And there is a time for politics in every great democracy, but there's also a time for governing. And we have to be reminded, whether we are a Democrat, Republican, Independent, or whatever, politics divides. Governing forces compromise and unites. And America needs to be united. And now with the Democrats in charge of all three branches, or excuse me, the House and Senate and the presidency, they have to pivot from politics to policy and governing pretty quickly, or they're going to be held accountable. As far as the accountability for the Republicans, I think it's going to have to be a determination of how damaged the former president is coming out of this impeachment, and I guess that remains to be seen. But that test for the former president is not in 2024. That test comes in 2022. The fact that he is largely blamed for the loss of the Senate in Georgia and what happened there, and screwing up the narrative completely and getting people unfocused, that literally cost us 2 seats. He has to change that in a hurry. And if he's not value added, if he is absolutely not value added to the reelection of Republicans and new Republicans being elected in 2022, then he's out for 2024. He won't even be considered.
Interesting.
Stacy, I want to just talk about one thing that Keith said. I got to tell you, I heard nothing but a litany of accusations against Democratic mayors, Democratic cities. Every time there was any kind of trouble, any kind of protest, Trump withheld funding from them. Trump wanted to send in federal troops. It was nothing but constant attacks on democratically run cities. I'm not saying the turnabout's fair play, but what I am saying is that, look, we've withstood some withering attacks these past 4 years from this guy over social problems, of which he was part. With his policies. So I look forward, and I take heart from the 5 or 6 or 10 Republican senators who met with President Biden and said, look, can't we work something out here? At least they're talking. Now, whether we achieve anything or not, that remains to be seen, but they're talking. And that's really, to get back to the regular order would be wonderful.
I have to bring this up if Keith or the governor's not going to, Joe, just and not to argue with you, but there are those who are not necessarily in favor of Trump, but at least in favor of the Republican side, who will say the Democrats from the get-go never gave Trump a chance.
And I'll have to go back to the meeting.
The moment he was elected, there was a quote, end quote, resistance. And
I'll have to go back to the meeting when Barack Obama was elected. That night,
absolutely,
the Republican leadership met in a restaurant in Washington, D.C. and said, our job for the next 4 years is to make sure he's not reelected. That's where we are today in politics.
But that's the fundamental reason why I believe
it's a shame. I take heart from those 10 senators. I do.
That national reform of federal elections for Congress, President, and the Senate are needed in the next 4 years, because I don't want to go through one more cycle of 2012 saying that Barack Obama, or 2008 that he was illegitimate, and then President Biden was illegitimate, President Trump was illegitimate. Enough. Yeah, we have to get to the point where people trust the system, and I still hope there will be a dialogue in the ensuing years to think of some national rules so one state can't rule one way and another state rule another at the county level. I think we have to, with quiet, lower voices, look for long-term reform to restore the integrity of the vote to the American people.
I agree with you. I do.
Stacy,
I agree.
Stacy, let me add it this way. I hate people saying Republicans and Democrats are saying A and B. Republican elected officials may be, Democrat elected officials may be, but it's a broad brush that is applied to everybody on both sides. For instance, I think every month from the time that he was elected or took the oath of office, President Trump, there were members of Congress, Democrat members of Congress were saying, we have to impeach him. We have to impeach him. From that point forward, I'm not saying that Democrats said, but there were members who said they represent that party. It goes around the other way now. We have to, I don't remember, Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, that people said that about President Obama. They did say he was not legitimate. But
Well, they want to throw him out because he wasn't born in America, according
right, but there was no impeachment statement. But that's when we have these individual senators and representatives, congressmen, governors, and so forth say things. Being a Republican first, I get tired of the whole party being blamed for what certain individuals say. It doesn't reflect an entire party. It doesn't reflect the entire Democrat Party. Many Democrats voted for Donald Trump. And many Democrats voted for me.
Right.
Republicans.
Stacy, let me add one more thing. The governor and Keith and I, we're friends. We embrace the Pittsburgh way. Our bosses were from different parties. In the governor's case, when he was U.S. attorney, his boss was George H.W. Bush. Rick Santorum for Keith, Dick Caligiuri, and Sophie Maslow for me. But you know what? We always worked together and got things done. Our bosses could be clashing, and we would work together. Just one step, just right below the surface, we managed to work together and get things done for the good of the community. And that's the way it's supposed to work. That's the Pittsburgh way. We're just not seeing that anywhere else.
It's
I
toxic.
agree. I want to bring this up because you guys, especially the governor, just kind of touched on this. And this is from an article several weeks ago by Gerald Seib of the Washington, New York. No, I've got to get the right. Which newspaper am I talking about here? The Wall Street Journal. That's what I'm trying to say. He's a columnist there.
That's the only one you
There you
read,
go.
I think, isn't it?
Well, it's one of the few I read. Anyway, and of course your column in the Trib, Joe. That's all.
Thank you, Stacey.
And since
Nice
you're already
plug.
here, I can't quote you, so I've got to quote somebody else. This is a quote from the article. In short, the problem has been the inability or perhaps the failure of the GOP to separate Trumpism from Trump. Would you guys agree with that? That's kind of what happened, and is that the problem for the GOP moving forward?
It's a good observation. How do you define Trumpism would be the first question. Is it an ultra conservative swing of the party? Has it replaced the Tea Party? I think Trumpism, if I were going to define it right now, is celebrity status of a political official. Because he was a celebrity going into it, and he built on it. He said things that people agreed with. If he retires from the scene, the big if he retires from the scene, the question is, where do those people go? Is there somebody else out there with the celebrity status? I don't think any of the officials out there right now have that kind of celebrity status. He didn't care what he said. That's what the people liked. I think that's what attracted many people to what he said. And I will tell you, I have many friends who I know are lifelong Democrats that are very much in the Trump camp, which surprised me. And then I have Republicans who are not in the Trump camp. They're not necessarily over supporting President Biden, but they voted for him. I know that. So I think we're going to a very uncharted waters in politics for the next couple of years.
Selena Zito is our friend and a local national columnist and writer. And she has always said that Trump was not the he's the cause of Trumpism. Trumpism really existed before Trump.
Yes,
is what she said. And that attitude, whatever that is that's going on out here, that still exists. There are people that still feel disaffected, and they seized on to Trump as the vehicle of Trumpism. But it could have been someone else, or it could have been no one for the time being. But it's still out there, and so I think it's still out there even today.
I agree. I think Chris Christie tried it first, but Trump had a bigger bullhorn.
And
Yeah,
A different personality. Yeah, more magnetic personality, I think. Yeah.
In our lifetime, some presidents are larger than life figures, and they're hard to even associate with a party because they are a party and a force unto themselves. And in many ways, Trump is ran as a Republican, but it's Trump. And I would compare that on the other side of the aisle, perhaps, to Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton was his own party. I mean, Bill Clinton, there was a vacuum when Bill Clinton left office because he was associated, obviously, as a Democrat, but it was Clintonism. It was the Clinton aura. So we're seeing that same pivot on the same side now for Republicans. There is a vacuum. We're going to see if we could put together a agenda to rebuild America and get it started again. And I think the people with the most trusted agenda for the American recovery in the years to come are going to get voted in 2022 and 2024. It remains to be seen. I think Trump is a factor, but I don't think we should overplay that card.
All right. You just brought up 2022, 2024. Keith, you have said before, you think the GOP is going to retake the Senate in 2022. However, 4 Republicans, incumbents, Pat Toomey of Pennsylvania, Richard Burr of North Carolina, Richard Shelby of Alabama, and Rob Portman of Ohio have now all said, they're all Republicans, they've all said they are not going to run for re-election. What does this do to your prediction, and why are they dropping out?
Well, they're dropping out, I'm sure, because it's an increasingly toxic atmosphere in politics. And all of us old bulls who were once in politics talk about the good old days. And unfortunately, it's not the good old days anymore. And some of them just aren't up for those type of battles. But my prediction hasn't changed one iota. I mean, notoriously, and I don't think 2022 will be any different, notoriously midterm elections are a punch in the face to the party that holds the White House. We have an evenly divided Senate. I am confident that the Republicans will pick up seats and regain the majority in 2022. And quite frankly, 2024 becomes even a bigger woe for the Democrats. In 2022, the Republicans actually have less seats to defend than they did in 2020. The Democrats have more seats to defend. But then when it goes to 2024, the Democrats will have 3 times as many seats to defend than the Republicans. So I can assure you, if the Republicans get control in 2022, they'll hold it through 2024 and even gain more seats because of the largesse of half their senators pretty much are up in 2024. Now, going through the 4 states you talked about, Ohio, solid Republican. Alabama, solid Republican. You can argue that North Carolina is in play, but I looked at that up before this program, and most of them say it's maybe a toss-up, and 2 of them say lean Republican. And then you go to Pennsylvania. I remind people before in the the Democratic Revolution of 2006, when Senator Santorum was sent home and replaced by Bob Casey, that was the first time in 44 years that a Democrat won a 6-year term in the United States Senate. You have to go back to Joe Clark in 1962. Harris Wofford, of course, won an unexpired term in 91. But since then, it has not been a fertile ground for Democrats in Pennsylvania until Bob Casey. So I would suspect that they're not going to sweep, that they're going to balance the power in Pennsylvania, and I am pretty confident that the Republicans will maintain the United States Senate the United States Senate seat in Pennsylvania at the midterm.
All right, just teed it up for you, Joe.
I'm not so confident he's right.
What a surprise.
But it was a compelling argument. And I'm also curious who your candidate is in Pennsylvania, Keith.
I'm not talking just yet.
No, Keith's right. Historically, these midterm elections are tough, for the White House, and this may or may not be an exception. I have no knowledge to base this on. This is my feeling. I think that people are going to get accustomed. They're going to get used to things being pretty calm, things running sort of normally, not hearing bombastic tweets from their president every day, not being afraid to look at their phone and their news feed. I'm just thinking that they may find some comfort in a little bit of repose while people are industriously working to get things done, to make progress. And they might get used to that, and they might want to hang on to it. So, we may be looking at less uh, uh, furious times, perhaps, and I hope so.
Governor, your take.
Well, Joe, I'm going to comment on, I think there's still going to be angst. There's going to be a lot of angst on what the president is proposing. He was trying to play, I'm a middle of the road guy. I'm a moderate. But some of his first executive actions were far left executive actions. And as you and I know, executive actions really aren't worth the paper they're written on, because it's never put into law if it doesn't get past the House and the Senate. And a new president comes in, he or she can wipe those out right away. His action against the pipeline right away turned thousands of workers that may have been Democrat workers before away. And that is continuing with some of his other executive actions, that he may not have that support, his party may not have that support come 2022. So I think it's going to come down individually to who are the candidates. And you're right, Joe. Right now I couldn't tell you who the Republican candidate is. I'm not even hearing anybody seriously saying I'm going to run. I know there's some people making phone calls to see if people would be interested. But then let's take a look at who the Democrats are going to run. And we already have one announced, the Lieutenant Governor Fetterman. And what are you doing there, Keith?
He's holding his head.
Fetterman.
And that could be
Yeah.
a personality.
Well,
So it could be a personality campaign in that respect, because we know he is very far left. Wanting to legalize marijuana, I don't think the state is still ready to want to legalize recreational marijuana in the middle of an opioid crisis.
Yeah, I think that's going to be more of a revenue driven decision than anything else. We're billions of dollars out of whack, and that's one way to pick up some revenue. So that will be the argument, but I don't think the state's ready for that either, and I'm not sure I'm ready for that. I don't know exactly where I stand on the issue. I can see both sides of it right now, but
let's focus in on Fetterman right now. The governor.
Yeah,
brought him up.
sure.
He is running for the seat. He's announced it. He ran for it one other time, did not get the nomination. He's already said he's garnered $1.5 million into his campaign chest. So you've been in Democratic politics for a while. He's the front runner right now. Is it over for the rest of any potential Democratic candidates?
Well, he's maybe the front runner now because he seems to be the only candidate in the race. He's winning a one-horse race. Which I could do that, right? but
We'd all like that.
yeah, right. He's certainly captured the imagination of the media, so he's sort of a media darling right now. When you're running as lieutenant governor, you're always one step back, right? Running for the Senate's a different deal. I mean, he's going to be way out front. And I think that the sheen that he has right now is going to rub off, and he's going to have to suffer a lot of slings and arrows because he'll be scrutinized more closely, and he'll be subject to some pretty sharp campaigning from his potential opponents. So I don't see this these happy days lasting, because politics it ain't beanball or ain't beanbag, they say, right?
Well, I would suggest that Fetterman and all the news reports, first of all, you're right, Joe, he's a one-trick pony right now. He's the only one talking and announced. And I did see the articles on the $1.5 million. I want to put it in perspective. $1.5 million isn't even close to where he needs to head. I mean, 15 years ago, Rick Santorum spent $44 million to go home. So it just gives you a sense of what these races are probably worth today, which is well north of $50 million. And I also remind people that he can even raise all that money, Fetterman, and not get there. Bloomberg had hundreds of millions and couldn't get traction. Some people are just not a good fit. And I would suggest that John Fetterman may be a good fit for certain offices, but he's a mismatch for the United States Senate. Folks, the United States Senate is the College of Cardinals in America. I mean, there's a sense of it being more intellectual and more policy driven, and people will not be able to wrap their hands around someone like John Fetterman as United States Senator. I think it's a mismatch for him as far as a political office, and I think he will be easily dismissed by the Republicans in 2022.
I think, frankly, he's going to have a difficult side on the Democrat side at some point in time. But let me make this observation. Everybody talks about politics, the smoky back rooms where they make all the decisions. Well, 40 years ago, the decisions were made by party leaders as to who's going to be the nominee. Those days are gone. It's the individuals that go out there and raise the money and make the coalitions and so forth. John Fetterman's going to have a group of people that are solidly behind him, particularly the legalized weed group, and I think the far left. Republicans are going to have other people, and I think there's other Democrats out there that still may come forward.
Would all of you like to go back to the old days the governor just talked about?
Yeah, as long as I'm in the back room.
There are a few simple rules, and they were consistently enforced, and so you could pretty much predict where you were headed, right?
Exactly. And that's also probably why you always had the next guy in line become the candidate a lot of times. I have a feeling.
Right.
So, Governor, I'd like to turn to this one because this has to do with the office you once held. The current governor, Tom Wolf, delivered his budget address. He wants to, I'm going to say, change the state's income tax from a flat rate, which it is right now, to what I'm going to call a progressive rate. He wants to reduce the corporate tax rate. You sat in that chair. Can he do this?
No. It's that simple. Constitutionally, he can't change the tax rate. That would require, in my recollection, it would require a constitutional amendment to be able to do that. So he just can't do that. This is a progressive wish list. I don't know whether he is auditioning for something in the Biden administration, but this is so far out of the realm of possibility, particularly when you have a Republican House and a Republican Senate, that this is what I want. He's not going to get it. And he knows he's not going to get it. There are Democrats that couldn't vote for many of the things that he wants. It sounds good, especially to the far left, but it's just not going to happen. Joe, you agree?
Yeah, I think he's swimming upstream on this, but maybe the governor and Keith might embrace that cutting of the corporate tax proposal that he threw in there. I think that was probably in there to sweeten the pot for the other side a little bit, but he has a tough campaign ahead of him if this is what his goals are.
Apparently he's looking to get invited to the right cocktail parties by the right liberal friends when he's out of office, because that's about all this type of posturing is going to get him. And there's no chance that a firmly controlled GOP legislature is going to give way to new taxes to burden people that are struggling so direly in Pennsylvania, especially small businesses. So I think I agree with the former governor that this is dead on arrival.
I think we need to talk about taxes someday too, because with the pandemic, the dynamics of downtown Pittsburgh changing, a substantial portion, the lion's share of the real estate tax revenue that supports the city of Pittsburgh, keeps it running throughout the city, comes from the downtown real estate market, and we're seeing some major changes. I think every major downtown property owner has filed a tax appeal or is preparing a tax appeal because the numbers have just changed dramatically. There are people thinking that they don't need as much space. In many cases, they're subletting their extra space so that the vacant space then is no longer marketable by the building owners. So the numbers are changing dramatically. And I think we're going to see a shift locally to residential property owners, which is a dangerous thing because that can spell a death knell for cities.
Yeah, especially in counties where it's not the county and city of, like Philadelphia. They are absolutely dependent on the suburbs coming into the city to spend money to keep their economy going.
Right.
I mean, it's now they're at 300,000 people as a population, where the population of the county is 1.2 plus million. Well, in 1960, the population of Pittsburgh was 710,000, and it was the same population in the county, 1.2 million. Everybody shifted to the suburbs. So
Yes.
they have to, as an economic engine, they have to rely on people coming and paying taxes and spending money and parking and liquor tax, none of which has happened in the past year. I can tell you one thing, you won't want to be deputy mayor this year. I mean, it's a tough road for the city.
Yeah, you're right, Keith. And I think that Bill Peduto has to be hoping he gets in just under the wire before the impact of this shift to residential property tax takes place.
Right.
We're looking at substantial increases to keep the city afloat. The school board is also clamoring for more money. These are tough times ahead.
We could do an entire seminar on the problem with the taxes that we have across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and how we tax. I mean, Joe just brought up the school districts. Those school districts have a higher taxing authority than the municipalities do, by far a higher tax. And when people complain about their real estate taxes, they kind of look at the township commissioners, like I was one, and blame the commissioners when it's really the school board. And nobody pays attention to those races, really. If we were to sit back and say, let's create a new county or new state, how we tax would be the issue. And it could take a decade to try and get agreement on anything.
Gentlemen, we're running out of time. Thank you so much for being with us once again on Around the Table Politics 2021. I'm sure the next time we get together, there'll be something new to talk about, as there always is in politics. Thanks, and we'll see you again the next time.
Thanks, Stacy.
Stacy, thanks.
This has been a CBSN Pittsburgh special presentation. We now return to our scheduled programming in progress.